Hey, it's Kevin Clancy with Clancy Real Estate, your Capital Region real estate expert. I want to thank you for joining me on my video real estate blog. As you know, I created this blog to save you time and money and give you hopefully valuable advice whether you're buying or selling a home in the Capital Region. Today, I want to answer two questions that I get quite often. One is, what is a seller concession? Is it legal? And how is it used? And the second question is, what's a lease option? And how's a lease option used? And can I buy a house with a lease option? So the first question, a seller concession is simply used by a purchaser so they have to come up with less cash at the closing. Remember, New York State has the highest closing costs in the country. We have young couples that have to bring $25,000, $30,000 sometimes to close on a house. So depending on the price range and the lender. So a seller concession is simply the seller getting a credit back at the closing. So suppose a purchaser were going to buy a house at $200,000. We would gross the price up to say $210,000. At the closing, the purchaser would get a credit for $10,000. The seller would get $200,000. The seller's still getting their $200,000 that they agreed on, yet the purchaser's getting a $10,000 credit. Now, effectively for the purchaser, they are rolling closing costs into a 30-year mortgage. So in the long term, it ends up costing them more, but in the short term, it's $10,000 less in cash that they need to bring to closing. It's $10,000 they can use for repairs to the home. As a seller, it often feels like you're giving the buyer money to buy your home, but you're not. It is completely legal as long as it's indicated to the lender, and everyone knows, and it's indicated on the HUD-1 at closing. So that's what a seller concession is. If you have additional questions, call me anytime. As far as the second question, lease options. Lease options are, we get calls literally dozens and dozens of times a month, people wanting to do a lease option on the home. And that's actually generally putting down option money of say $5,000 or $10,000 and then leasing the home, and a portion of the rent is applied towards the purchase price with an option to buy the home generally in a year or 2 years out. In my experience, it's buyer beware on these. Generally, a seller that's willing to do a lease option is upside down on the house, or the house has substantial defects. A purchaser that wants to do a lease option and not purchase generally doesn't have the greatest credit, and that's why they're doing it. So you have to be very, very careful. In my experience, it's very rare that a lease option actually works out perfectly. However, in my own experience, a couple years ago, I bought a property, and I believe I bought the property for $35,000. I sold it a month later for $65,000. I held a mortgage on it. The purchaser had owned many, many multifamilies, could not get a mortgage, but had decent credit. Gave me $10,000 up front and then made payments on the home. My effective cash-on-cash return was, a very good rate of return on the home. It was a win-win for me. It was a win-win for him. He got in a house. 2 years later, he ended up exercising the option of buying the house. So it really was a win-win for him and for myself. So they do work out occasionally, but you really, really have to have buyer beware as well as a seller beware, because many, many things can go wrong. If you have additional questions on lease options, how they're used, or seller concessions, please call me anytime. We're having an absolutely great winter season. If you're thinking about selling your home, now's the time to get geared up and ready to go. If you're purchasing a home, it's absolutely great time to get in now before interest rates rise. I'm Kevin Clancy. Call me anytime at 461-9937. Have an absolutely great week and appreciate you more than you know. Thanks.